Tonight's episode of the Math Together Show is brought to you by Exemplars, rich and engaging K-12 math performance tasks. Welcome to the Math Together Show, where thoughtful educators gather and learn together. I am Dr. Sue Looney.
I'm Heidi Subnani.
And I'm Molly Vokey. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
We are really excited to dig into this question a little bit later with our guest. Molly is going to introduce our guest in a little bit.
Yeah. We're going to be talking about how do we shift away from a binary perspective of teaching for equity and justice. So very much in line with a lot of the things that we've been talking about in the last year. So very excited to have Farshid here with us.
Awesome.
Yeah. We would love for you to let us know where you are watching from. You can do that in the chat. And if possible, we will, if you have questions, you can put them there as well. And we will try and incorporate them into the show and hit like and tell us where you're watching from.
Great. And if you're looking for support, if you're looking to hop on our mailing list, we do share out resources for free. You can do that by texting the word Looney to 22828. We are also super excited. We have a summer institute running at the end of June and again in August. In fact, June is almost full. It's called Emerging Stronger. So you can find out details about that. And we're going to say a little bit more at the end of the show about that. Next week's episode is going to be dedicated to helping you out with that idea of how we go to school next year and just appreciate all of the good learning that's happened this year. Mm-hmm. Also, our website has lots of resources. So that's an easy one, looneymath.com. Feel free to check that one out.
Yes.
So let's get to it.
That's right. Let's introduce Farshid. For the last 20 years, Farshid's experiences include teaching students mathematics throughout the U.S. and Canada by serving as a university teacher-educator and high school teacher. His research focuses on developing teachers' conceptual understanding of mathematics through an emphasis on relevant context, connections, and coherence, while engaging and empowering students and teachers through equitable mathematical experiences. Wow. He actively engages in providing successful professional development for teachers and school districts related to teaching mathematics with a student-centered approach. He is currently a board member of the National Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators and very active with NCTM. Let's bring him in.
Hello.
Yay, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking some time for us. We really appreciate seeing you here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
A pleasure.
Yes.
We love to start out our show with this question. What is your why? It helps those who maybe don't know you yet get to know a little bit about you. And so tell us, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
I love to just learn, communicate, and then grow with people. And so mathematics is just one of the areas where I have the privilege of doing that over the past couple of decades. But being a classroom teacher and a university teacher educator, part of my goal is to be able to empower students and teachers through mathematics, just so that we can make sense of our world. We can engage together in this sense making and this reasoning, because the world is beautiful and it's complex. But in order to do that effectively now and in the future, our students with our teachers, we need to have a coherent sense, and mathematical understanding is critical towards that.
This idea of making sense of our world with mathematics, so much of what happened this year with the pandemic, making sense of the efficacy of our vaccines, all of it, I keep saying, mathematics keeps saving me. I just keep paying attention to the numbers, right? It's really right there, but so many people don't understand how to interpret what they're seeing.
Right. And then we want people to be able to interpret and reason, make sense of things, so that they don't necessarily have to rely on other people's interpretation of facts. Mm-hmm. And I'll put, some air quotes around interpretation. Yeah. But at the same time, we want situations that impact people and communities. We want our students and future citizens, right, in our communities to not only have a say but to be able to understand how things happen, why things happen, and then what are some of the systems that are in place that based on the structure, they should be able to do something about. And mathematics is largely about understanding structures and analysis.
Right. And this year we've had a lot of, a lot of structures, broken structures, and then also new structures to try to understand in terms of COVID and how it spreads. I mean, gosh, the last year was probably the biggest learning curve that anyone's ever had in their life.
I love the fact that you use learning curve, right? Because like most things, understanding and familiarity comes along a progression. And so oftentimes people that first experience mathematics think of it as data points, as singular points. But what ends up happening to make sense of the world around us, we need to see starting points, previous points, and then where the progression might lead us. So that we're not constantly in this react mode.
Right. It's that idea of, sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, I don't want to dwell in the past. I just want to move forward. I'm like, but if we're not looking at those data points that led us to where we are right now, we're going to either continue the same mistakes that we have always made, or I often see that kind of mindset as that's a way to hold things the way they were and keep power in that structure versus actually making changes going forward. And so I have to be able to look at and realize what those numbers are telling me and what those patterns are saying in order to really make decisions about where I want to be going forward.
And I think this is where it's not unique to mathematics, where reflection and identifying patterns and events play such a big part. And that's, as one educator, I love to engage in history to inform contexts, because understanding any situation requires us, demands of us to fully realize what context we are talking about. And then the assumptions that we make and the predictions that we make have to remain connected to those contexts.
Right. Absolutely. Well, let's dig into the question that you've thought about and you want to, kind of delve on into. We'll just get right to it. How do we shift away from a binary perspective of teaching for equity and justice? Where do we even start with this?
So it's actually multifaceted. So I think maybe part of the question should be, a lot of times as educators, we feel like we want to commit to addressing and raising awareness and enacting towards a more equitable and just world. And we do, and we should. It is our obligation professionally and personally. But at the same time, we are also committed to teaching for content and connections. If we fall into that trap of thinking that it has to be strictly one or the other, that doesn't match reality. The reality of teaching is that we are committed to these goals, and then the mathematical understanding that it takes to make sense, to be able to connect, that should always be married to the contexts and the systems in play. And so a binary approach would mean, have we achieved, say, justice? It's not a thumbs up, thumbs down, yes or no question. Things happen along a progression. And then from place and time, then those things shift back and forth. And the same thing happens with our student understanding of different content areas. I don't believe that many times our teachers would tell us, oh, I love it when a student says the light bulb just came on. I don't believe that, because I don't believe that it's off and then all of a sudden it turns on. At best, it's a dimmer switch, right? It happens gradually. And so if we have a binary perspective, then I think that can be very marginalizing and it doesn't match reality.
I feel like that's a lot. I mean, depending on, what classroom you're in, and even in the same school, you can have that going on. And then you can have all this efficacy in the world next door with equity and justice for all. But I feel like that's such a tall order to try to achieve for everyone, right? Like, how do we even approach doing that for the whole United States?
Along a progression, right? Like everything else.
Right.
One of the parts that is, I don't believe me or in education, we're not finished products, and neither is this effort. And so grand challenges require commitment, personally and professionally. And the beautiful things about, say, math education as a field is that we have a lot of colleagues and a lot of collaborators and a lot of allies. And so that we don't have to take on this just on the individual level. And so part of this commitment, part of this challenge is we want the world to be better for our children. And so that takes unity in effort, and it takes patience as educators as well as individuals in our communities.
What I'm thinking about some of these beliefs that are, it's this or it's that. I talk a lot about my website, Same But Different. And I love it because actually we delve into, you can be both. There's gray area. The world is not black and white, right? And so what you mentioned is that it can be marginalizing to have this binary look. So you're a math student or you're not, right? You're in AP classes or you're not. You're passing the state test or you're not. There's all these almost like gatekeeper moments. And so I wonder what we do to call attention to those moments so that we put ourselves less in those situations.
Well, in reality, as teachers of students in mathematics, not teachers of mathematics, but teachers of students in mathematics and other subject areas, then we focus on context, right? And so when, let's say, if we're looking in middle schools or high school, and we're focusing on when is a function continuous, we talk about where it is and where it's not. It's not strictly yes or no. Even those are domain specific. Our understanding of something, is it that potentially, if you have a triangle, is it what are the characteristics? So we delve into situations constantly where we examine the situation, and then we think about what is happening, what else could happen, and then how do we move back and forth between these situations. If it didn't, then we wouldn't have all the aspects of a spectrum or a range of outcomes, or even, for a technology example, a slider, right? That allows us to see what happens when.
Yeah. So Jennifer is saying it makes me think about how we need to push ourselves to shift our everyday thinking from either or to a both and.
Absolutely. And in fact, in one of the NCTM talks that I was fortunate to give recently with my good friend and colleague, Catherine Ye, and also Siri Desai, who's one of our PhD students at the University of Central Florida, we talked about that. It's actually being committed to both and not settling for just one. And this is also where it comes in with the notion of intersectionality being so critical. And in the very beginning, we talk about the complexities of life. Most of life does not happen in a binary setting. So for instance, if you think about the amount of light that we have during the day, we don't say there is no light and then there is full light. It goes back and forth. But at the same time, if we think about not just mathematics, but the people involved, right? If I could share a quick graphic that we used. Okay, are you able to see the complexity of identity? So this is the graphic that Siri Desai and I created, having to do with the complexities of identity and how, for instance, only having a binary lens would be not only inaccurate, but actually oppressive and marginalizing and dehumanizing. Think about if we strictly look at race along a binary. or gender or sexual orientation or language
Right.
or religion or housing or immigration status or nation of origin or health. When do we say, is a person healthy or not healthy? We don't live in the binary.
Right.
And so when it comes to these things, I think an important part to remember is that the beauty of life is in understanding the intersections. But we also have to be careful because so many of our students and our teachers are what Catherine, I've heard her talk about this, they live in multiple marginalized spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so someone like me, for instance, English is my third language. However, I am not considered an English language learner either. So
Right.
which is it exactly? So
Yeah.
sometimes what we have to do is shift away from this binary sense and then think about how can we do better for people and our communities through mathematical understanding and through a commitment to equitable practices.
That was the connection I was trying to make. So powerful, Farshid. Thank you for that sharing of that screen. This idea of rehumanizing mathematics. We hear this theme recently. It's really exciting. And so by rehumanizing this subject, which is ancient, which has been with us from all time, we invite more people to the table, right? We talk about inclusivity and inclusion of everybody.
Right.
So how do I'm a fifth grade teacher in my math classroom. I'm trying to bring it down to a concrete example of me teaching. And I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot too much. I'm getting ready for my math classroom. Is it about a particular lesson? Is it a mindset? You know, how do we sort of anchor this?
Yes.
Yes, it's all of those things. Remember, it's not either or, Sue.
I have much to learn. I often say I am an imperfect human doing my best. So
we're right there with you. No worries at all. But I think what ends up happening is that the part that's a mindset is this notion that we work towards things, and that doesn't mean in a single direction. And so climbing doesn't mean never taking a step back.
Right.
I love it.
Progress doesn't mean that you never slip.
Right.
For our students, it's about what are these different stepping stones and progressions in a meaningful, authentic, connected, and coherent way that they get to experience how to make sense of what is around them. If you think about, if we were to kind of just go outside and happen to be, my daughter's name is Nika, which means a rose blossom in Farsi. And so if we were to go through a rose garden, you wouldn't say we're strictly going to look at the structure of the rose. What impacts us as human beings is the structure, but so is the wonderful smell. So is the way that things grow together. So is the feeling that we have through that experience. Our students don't experience mathematics in a full human kind of a way. No. And we as teachers and teacher educators, we can do something about that. In fact, we should do something about that.
Something that you said really resonated with me, and I feel like it's been right from the start from you talking, is that, you know, this idea of the spectrum and having not everything be either or, but just the idea that teachers and students need to know that what you said, that we can go back a step. Like, I constantly hear teachers say, well, you have it today, but will you tomorrow, kind of thing. And lots of the time the answer is no, right? I mean, no, I don't remember that from yesterday, but but that needs to be okay. We need to have that be part of the, like how Sue was talking about, is it a frame of mind, or, you know, that has to be okay for teachers and for students.
I mean, what you're saying rings so true to me also. If we talk to people that others would dub mathematicians, because we are all mathematicians, that probably less than 5% of mathematics is about calculation and memory. And yet, if you were to ask students and the parents of many of our students, that's what they view mathematics to be. That's not what it has been, but unfortunately, that's what school experiences have been. And in an increasingly technological world, the part that is strictly calculation-based shouldn't always be done by us. You should be looking at situations, understanding them, refining them, and then having those serve humanity.
Right.
Well, and having that permission to, and the ability and access, I think, both as teachers and as students, to know when to go forward and when to go back on a progression, and when, how to incorporate. I think this year has done a lot for equity in education, but also in some sense may have been like, okay, we're going to do a PD on equity, or we're going to read a book together, and then we're never going to touch it again. We're not going to incorporate it into what we're doing in the classroom. We're not, so it's this idea of that those two things are so interconnected, and that it doesn't stop. Like, there's a reason why we need math and equity working together. We need looking for ways to be more just in the service of math, and math in the service of justice. I don't know if that
right. Well, I mean, sometimes concrete examples help a great deal. And sometimes we see a lot of things that are deemed mathematical. So for instance, if we were to have students deal with fractions, and they were to write something like, 20/50th, most adults, and in fact, many students, would quickly somehow simplify that to be 2/5. My question would be, if the 20/50th stood for 20 students in the 5th grade, right, out of 50 students, what have you done with the rest of the students if you say it was 2/5, right? So there are connections. So we can think through the ratio aspect. We can think through equivalent fractions. But context allows us to think about situations, people, circumstances that affect communities. And we should never have the context and the meaning and the human connections to be detached and decontextualized from mathematical explorations.
But I think that's how math has been defined for many, many years. And I mean, if you talk to most parents of students today, even, that their experience is very much about calculations and tests and speed.
But I would come back and say, if that is how it's been, then what we're saying is that reading is about just pronouncing simple letters. If we want to make sense of wonderful poems and beautiful books and be able to communicate effectively, it can't strictly be about the symbolic interpretation. It has to be about the sense making. It has to be about the journey. It has to be about the coherence. And this is why whenever I have opportunities to do professional development, I share the story that I thought I was an effective teacher when I was teaching at the university level first. But then I realized I needed to understand high school mathematics better, and how students think. So I came and I taught high school. Not surprisingly, then I found out that I needed to understand middle school mathematics better, and then elementary foundational mathematics much better. And so it's not either or again. It's not that we have to understand elementary mathematics or secondary mathematics or post-secondary. It's the progression and the connections within and across them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's a theme that runs through this, which is this theme of connectivity.
Yeah.
Right? How do we...
Kind of like people, right?
Kind of like people.
Right.
Go ahead, Heidi.
No, I was just saying, I love that analogy of it makes reading like just decoding basic words and sounds. Like, I haven't thought about it exactly in that that connection. And like we say, oh, math is beautiful and it's all of these other things, but it is, and when we think about that, then you're taking away all the beauty of language if you're just decoding simple sounds. And we do that in mathematics also, when we isolate just calculation versus sense making, or how it's connected to art and music and history and culture and all of these other ways of seeing and doing.
Right. Somewhere along the way, we lost the opportunity that still definitely exists at the elementary level, and it can exist at the secondary level, where we stopped talking about the connections, about situations, and somehow fell into silos. Mm-hmm. And so we tend not to do that in other disciplines as much. Yeah. So literacy helps us a great deal with that. And the example would be, if this zooming in and zooming out aspect of it, if you look at beautiful pointillism paintings, right? Mm-hmm. If we say we're only going to look at the dots, we're going to miss the huge big picture.
Right.
If you only look at the big picture, you're going to lose out on the details, the structure, the placement, and the how it all fits together. It can't be one or the other. It has to be both.
But somewhere along the way, we decided that that's for the kids that have arrived, right? So I can't put context on the problem if you can't do X, Y, or Z. Or we don't have time for the beauty of tessellations and exploring mosaic tiles and bringing in a story. That's for the kids. That's for the kids that got it. All of us are very busy getting through the gateway to make it. So we need to flip it on its head. We need to say, actually, the heart of mathematics is all of this. And oh yeah, there's a few minutes where we could use some skills to make sense of. But the big idea is, so I
it's a different lens. It's a different lens.
I feel like it was done intentionally early on in the 20th century in terms of producing a particular type of citizen that was ready for the workforce. So we took away all of that.
Well, I think like you've alluded to it. One of the things that I do as a research focus area is connected to this notion of how do we get here, right? So I do the history of mathematics education, and I teach a course on that at UCF in Orlando. And it's partially because of trying to make sense of things haven't always been the way they currently are. And we have to be able to draw on the effective things from the past to be able to inform a better future. And potentially, if we go back, my father, who is one of my heroes, he just says, this thing about math and philosophy and spirituality and the stars and all of this, we're just born too late. 400 years ago, the people who studied everything, people call them, at least in the West, they call that being a Renaissance person.
Yes.
For the rest of the world, one of the phrases used is polymath. Polymath, like multiple. And then you hear the word math. But we didn't actually used to need to separate, but specialization has a place. But for our students who are exploring the world and trying to become more aware and play with these ideas in literacy, in history, in math, in science, then they need to be able to see these connections, because none of us step outside and then say, for the next 5 minutes, I'm only going to use my math brain. For the next 2 minutes, I'm going to put on my science goggles, right? We are fully human, and we need to live in a fully human way.
Oh, okay. I gotta turn on my human.
Well, we have an opportunity to redesign. I mean, we have an opportunity that we should not let go. Anyhow,
right.
All of this conversation is so full of passion and energy. You're probably seeing me turn red.
Sweating.
Right.
You got pulled it all out of you. Pulled it all out of you.
The challenge is the rest of you also have to match your shirt. See, I'm doing my best.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, I have lots of colors. I just have a
It's all intentional in teaching and in conversations about education. It's all about intention.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do that, but so Farshid, how can our listeners learn more from you?
By me first listening to them.
Oh.
Because the biggest part of teaching is about listening and drawing on the greatest resource that we have.
Yes.
And that's the privilege of having colleagues and students.
Correct.
And so I don't believe in necessarily going into a situation and already knowing the exact best thing to do before ever having met and realized the context of that community and that school.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I'm happy to share is that there is a commitment to wanting to learn and grow in a collaborative way through patience, through love, and through a commitment to be patient with ourselves at least as much as we are patient with our students.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, well, it's because we've gotten good at being patient with our students.
Yeah.
But professionally, it's almost like, well, I paid my dues. I was, I am now here. Well, but what we need is to be that patient with our own professional growth and get the help of colleagues. And if it's related to professional development, if it's related to equitable teaching, we learn by listening, and we learn through accessing resources and taking part in these critical conversations. So the reason that I'm at the university level now is I wanted to be able to engage with, let's say, about 100, 150 teachers on a year-to-year basis. Every one of those teachers then goes on for many, many years and impacts that many students. So there's the mathematics again, right? So from a skill standpoint, you get to have an impact in a different way. But that is not separate from going in, learning with, co-teaching, doing PD, doing research, and collaborating with colleagues from around the country and around the world in seeing, what did you try? How much of it was appropriate? What kind of revision did you make? And so trying to kind of, again, be patient in trying things and not believing that if something worked in one setting on one day, that must mean it has to work every day in every setting.
Right.
Even mathematics isn't like that.
Even mathematics.
Yeah.
That was like throwing the gauntlet down.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Done.
Yeah, that resonates very much with the work that we do, that there isn't a one size fits all. And I often start a PD, especially with a new group of teachers. I'll say, I'm here to learn. And I let that sit, and I'll say, that might sound strange to you because you've hired me to come in, but I can't work with you until I learn very much more about you. So I am here to learn.
Yeah. And one of the privileges is over the last maybe 10 years or so, I've had opportunities to work with the same school district for multiple years. And then you become a professional family. You collaborate together, you exchange ideas together, you meet up at conferences together, you sometimes read the same books together. You go in, and the educator that I am for prospective teachers today is because of the teachers who have taken me into their classrooms and the students, not only mine, but theirs, so that we inform each other. And then year after year, that professional family grows, but it comes from trust. It comes from having a common vision, but it comes through kindness also. And I feel that especially over the last year and a half, one of the things that I'm hoping we have all learned a little bit better is the grace that we need to have with teachers, because resilience doesn't even begin to cover it. And flexibility doesn't become even close to describing the situation. And so I'm privileged to have my wife, her name is Farinaz, and she's a first grade teacher. And I learned so much from her
Mhm.
because what we do with, say, primary kids, with K2, that should inform what we do, say, in 3-5. And that should inform what we do in 6-8 and 9-12 and beyond. But we can't just have this lens that I know exactly how things go. Because we do, I do not.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
We do together.
Right.
Yeah. So people can find you at this website.
Right. So I think the best way is farshidsafi.wordpress.com. I'm sort of working on bringing that along more. I am much more active on Twitter. And so the best way to reach me is if you want to learn a few facts and some things that I've had the fortune of doing over the last maybe 10, 15 years, the website is great with that. The best way to kind of see about some of the experiences, both at the university level, at the classroom level, K-12 level, professional development, research opportunities, service to the field, then I think Twitter is probably the best way to go. And I'm still shocked that nobody else wanted at Farshid Safi.
It's very popular. It's a
I
very
jumped on it.
popular name.
You
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
That was smart. That was smart.
Yeah.
Yes. I had to jump on mine because it was my dad or I. It's like
Yep.
one of the two Subnanis
You were
in the
quicker.
country.
You were quicker.
Yeah, I got it. Too bad, Dad. So we would love to give you the opportunity for the last word.
Sure. I would just begin by just thanking our colleagues, our teachers, our administrators, our coaches, our students, our parents, because teaching and learning has to be a group effort. And without that sense of how collaboratively, not just during school hours, but beyond that, we can actually make positive changes come about, then I don't think we're going to get there. The word that I want us to use is that teaching equitably and having equitable mathematics teaching practices and experiences, it sort of comes from just being more human. And so if we not only recognize, but make a commitment to valuing our students, making their brilliance visible in every classroom, and making sure that what we do is for them and not for us. So if we have an activity that we love, if it's not relevant and authentic, then we need to set that aside. If we have a curriculum that can be made better by being more committed to equity and justice, we need to find the resources, and our colleagues from around the country are doing phenomenal work. And so we don't need to create things from scratch. We just need to be in communication with each other and then access and modify appropriately, because we want to engage our students in critical thinking, analysis, sense making, so that the world can become more just through mathematical experiences.
Wow, that was a great synopsis.
Yes,
that was well
thank
said.
you.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise, thank you for the time, and thank you to your listeners and viewers. And people can follow, and please carry on the conversation. And I would love to continue to learn from all of us.
Excellent.
Thank you
Great.
so
All
much.
right. Thank you. Take
Thank-
good care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Awesome.
Gosh, so positive. Love, love, love.
Mhm.
Love it. Jennifer's right on his page too with all of her comments, right?
Yep.
You have comments to put up?
No, she just, her comments were just all right in line with everything that he was saying. So
Awesome. Well, if you would like to continue the learning, we continue this conversation with people that are in our learning community, and you can find us on our website. So feel free to check us out. We are interested in learning and continuing on this journey and supporting all of you. And so feel free to check us out.
And next week we have, for the first time in a long time, we have no guests joining us. It's going to be the three of us talking about how can we emerge stronger for next year? What are some of the things that we can do that is going to make a big difference? Talking a lot about what Farshid was talking about today. So please join us next week on May 26th.
All right. And thank you, everybody, for being here this evening. Remember to always be curious and always be kind. Take good care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.